Hey y'all, I'm Ada K. And I must confess, I'm a trial junkie. I enjoy viewing trials as if I was the seated juror. So grab a cup of java, get comfy, and join me as we hop into court. And don't forget to comment, like, and most importantly, subscribe. And if you're really enjoying the channel, please join our membership. Hello, can you hear me? Hello, everybody, welcome. I am having to use some different ears, so this is a little different for me, so I apologize. Hi, I'm Ada K, and we're going to be going over a judge shuts down DA in a heated courtroom exchange. I saw this at 3 o'clock in the morning and went, I gotta do this. So, hello, Dr. Bullbutter. Hello, Eddie. Hello, Kathleen. Welcome. We're going to be following and talking about and going through the Pike County Massacre. I never heard of this. And he's due in court in one of the accused is due in court sometime in 2025. They had a evidence hearing and it did not go well. Absolutely didn't go well. I'm going to give a quick rundown of what we're looking at so you have some kind of an idea of what's happening. So in April of 2016, Ohio police found 8 slain persons in a trailer across Pike County. 7 of them belonging to the same Roden family, and another was a fiance of one of the Roden family members. After 2.5 years, the arrest came, and they, how do I put this? Members of another local family, the Wagners, who had a business and personal ties with the Rodens, now face capital unaliving of the family. Something along the lines of an obsession over custody of a 4-year-old daughter of Edward Jake Wagner and the victim Hannah Roden motivated the violence, according to the Ohio District General Attorney General Mike DeWine, and the authorities said the unalivings were methodical. So there were 8 people discovered. We're going to take a deeper dive into this case, but I'm just trying to give you a quick heads up as to what the case is about. Ooh, I'm going to actually probably restream this trial if we don't have anything else to do. So, well, it got heated in court yesterday. And this judge, I have to admit, kudos, because if I was this judge, I would have definitely thrown this assistant DA in jail. It got bat ship crazy. So let's watch this, and then we will go into the other information on the case. How about that? So here we go. This gentleman in the red, and I use it loosely, is accused along with 3 other people of unaliving a family of 8. One family unalived another family. Hey, Susan.
I think we're going to work on, I believe on December 16th, is the 404B stuff. We have been provided a list back in February, I think of 21 or 22. It's pretty exhaustive. And preparing for today, when you go through, is it relevant? Number one, if it's relevant, is it character evidence? Is it character? Does it meet one of the exceptions? If it does it meet 2 sections? Is it still, prejudicial? So I think some of the things I'm assuming the prosecution's not going to use to try and billies, but I think as long as we work the next 6 weeks on that stuff, then it should. So when you say discovery, not itself, but some of those things I think are appropriate, some of them aren't, but that's just our opinion. I'm sure the government has a different opinion. So
I'm sure we have a different opinion. Yes, sir.
Nobody needs to get up and talk on their feet. My apologies. You can do whatever you want. If you're comfortable on your feet, if you wanted to relax and lean back, thanks for the respect. Just not necessary if you don't think it's working for you. Go ahead.
It's hard not to do it.
No, it's whatever you want to do, you can do it. No offense taken, however you want to do it.
You're polite at the moment.
I think what it's going to involve is us meeting, we do all have the fortune of living
Hear me?
and working in
Oh.
close proximity to
Hello.
one another geographically.
that.
So, I know that we anticipate meeting now that they've got the witness list, talking about stipulations and witnesses that we are going to need to call versus not need to call. I would anticipate the same thing with the exhibits and with the other acts as well, that we can narrow it down to those things that are disputed or whatever. So,
Like I'm trying to understand where you're getting hung up and if I can do anything to help.
To help, Your Honor, just to kind of, I'll just give general categories. It was filed back in February 2021. There's stuff that specifically goes to Jake, stuff that specifically goes to George, stuff that specifically goes to Angela, and stuff that specifically is alleged of my client's other acts. So and there's kind of groups like that. So just depending on what they intend to introduce, because, initially, potentially it could have been all four of them, having trial at the same time, and then the state chose to bifurcate. So, so then it's always been a question of, hey, what are they going to use on our client, or, try to use on that. So that's kind of the concept. Did that help?
It does.
Okay.
Thanks. Like we might be sorting this out in the middle of the trial, like we always do.
Potentially, yeah.
Like I would expect that.
Yeah, we probably will. I just don't want to have to do the ones that really, are cut and dry, that you feel one way or another, perhaps in advance. So.
Mr. Hayes doesn't know me well, but I'm relatively certain he doesn't want to see an interlocutory.
Ooh, that's
Nor does
one.
any lawyer want that. Unless, of course, you need it, then you find a way to get it.
That's snip one. It's going to get real snippy, y'all. I mean, like, scary.
With regard to discovery, is there anything else the defense wants to bring up?
No.
How about the state with regard to discovery?
no. I think we are, as far as the state is concerned, is have provided everything that we should. Obviously, we have an ongoing duty to continue to do so, which we would absolutely continue to do. And I don't suppose that they have anything that they should be giving me either, so.
If it's of any help, I never liked as a trial lawyer to be ambushed. Then I
Here we
realized
go.
the remedy to the ambush as a judge is to set the evidence aside, toss them out, not give people a chance to adjust to the newly discovered evidence. So even though I know a remedy is to give a continuance, I'm often hesitant to go that way, and I'm more inclined to say it's too late to bring it in now, so whether you're ineffective or whether I just committed an irreversible error will be sorted out later. So like we want to get this right. Mr. Wagner, we want to do this right the first time. That's what this is all about.
Y'all,
And I
it's
don't
getting-
usually find
gonna get
lawyers
bad.
that are trying to shank anybody. They often get overwhelmed by the difficulty of the case and the amount of materials to absorb. That's where it comes up. So we'll try not to have that happen. That's why you got a good batch of lawyers standing around you. I will acknowledge that I still have sitting on my desk the answer to your motion for change of venue. But it's meant to be sitting there, but it can't sit much longer. So I'll let that get filed when it seems like we're closer. I knew I wasn't going to file it before today. Like I'm still learning, I'm still processing the whole litany.
By the way, I think he is the third judge on this trial. This started back in 2018, I believe, This is another Sarah Boone.
There were
Not in the fact of lawyers, but judges.
copious amounts of expected motions that the defense filed in response to the specification for death. And I think the last representation from one of the defense lawyers was most of those are being withdrawn because they were filed in anticipation of being thorough. So you want to talk in that regard, Mr. Hayes, whatever, Mr. Collins? I don't care.
I think hypothetically, Your Honor, they will be withdrawn once we get to a magic point of not needing them, so to speak. I don't mean magic in that way. Yeah, and I believe that will hopefully happen before the December status conference or motion hearing. So I think that is that's our intention, Your Honor. It's our intention to withdraw them unless something comes in silence.
Does that sound right, Mr. Neffler?
Does sound right, Your Honor.
We're very close, Your Honor.
From my first event, I've heard the discussion, the negotiations about writing an appropriate agreement with regard to whatever it is you're trying to agree upon. So how are we working on your agreement?
Your Honor, as this court knows, or I think we brought to the attention, and I don't think anyone would dispute this, the agreement that we're trying to fashion, there's not really a template for it. And, we're trying to accomplish certain legal realities, and it's, just a matter of wordsmithing it so that both parties are satisfied that if an event happens, we're in the position that we need to be in. And so it's, we're working on it. We've done back and forth.
I'm going to do this.
Conceptually, we've agreed.
Conceptually, we agree.
So that's tactfully vague, but I won't let it go.
No, the
So
judge
now tell me
and her
what you're
are gonna
trying
go at
to
it.
do with
Wait.
more specificity, because I want a more specific record.
Just wait.
I believe as a group, we're trying to
Really?
achieve the concept of nobody is accused or can be found of ineffective assistance of counsel, and no one can be accused of prosecutorial misconduct, so to speak. Is that a fair way of putting it? And that it's a fair resolution that all parties, maybe you don't agree with 100%, but they agreed to 100% when it's signed and everything, but they agreed to work towards that measure.
What's the trigger for the lawyers to have personal responsibility? Like, what are you dealing with?
It's an unorthodox situation, and again, it doesn't happen very often, and so there's not a lot of guidance for us on case law or things of that nature that will, give us, hey, definitely. So we kept our client up to date on everything. He's in agreement, and so once I believe the government is satisfied with some specifics, then we'll have everything in agreement.
Is this in the realm of removal of the death penalty specification?
Yes, sir.
Does it go beyond that? Mr. Wagner, from the start, this case has been really important because of a specification calling for the death penalty. You've heard that before, right?
Yeah, Your Honor, I've heard it.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Then there was a series of negotiations, and there's witnesses who have testified based upon representations that the death penalty is to be removed, right?
They've mentioned that.
Okay, so I think that's a foregone conclusion based upon the representations from the lawyers.
Maybe.
So what they're arguing about is removal of the death penalty. And They have been going back and forth over this for months. So let's see what the judge does. He ain't too happy. It just gets a little worse. Promise you that.
So I'm taking this where I want to take it, but is it a foregone conclusion that the death penalty specification is being withdrawn?
I believe so. I don't want to,
Believe so. Here we
you
go.
know, commit perjury or anything, but that is the goal. If we can get the language that, so let me give you this scenario. In George Wagner's case, his son's case, we did it as a death penalty case because the agreement with Jake Wagner is if you testify truthfully, then we dismiss the death back, not only for you, but for the individual that you are testifying in
Right.
their trial.
Similar representation in Angela Wagner's.
No.
So,
No, we did not reach that agreement with her.
okay.
So it's only Jake. So, in that scenario, the state and the state alone decides whether or not they're satisfied that Jake Wagner appeared and testified truthfully, right? Because we don't dismiss the death sentence unless we believe that to be true. In this situation, we're trying to fashion it so that we dismiss it ahead of time, again, for the mutual benefit of the parties. The unorthodox that he's talking about is they have to waive double jeopardy and speedy trial after the death specs. We have to dismiss it ahead of time, and we have to have enough assurances that if things go sideways, which I don't think any of us actually anticipates happening, but if that event were to occur, the state has to feel confident that it will have that same ability to make that decision, that whether or not Jake Wagner has fulfilled his end of the bargain, right? So, as Mr. Collins said, I'm unaware of anybody else doing this on the planet. Now, maybe they have, I just don't know that. But that's the challenge. And we're both sides are trying earnestly to fashion an agreement that accomplishes, confidence in the agreement that we get, that it's accomplishing what they need to do, it protects their clients' rights, and, the state protects its rights as well.
I'm
Anything else?
sitting
Thank you. Anything,
Yes.
Mr. Collins, Mr. Hayes on that?
there, and I'm
I think
looking
that's
for
a fair
it.
assessment.
Okay, the snark begins.
We appreciate you asking about the concept.
Did you hear the sigh? Look at the judge's face.
Everybody in the room needs to understand,
Here we go.
I'm not going to be on the tip of the spear. Like, my patience has been necessary and appropriate, and I'm not going to micromanage the lawyers. But what you're telling me is no different than what I heard in September, and I believe everything you just said. I have full confidence you can get there. When you don't get there, and I become the tip of the spear, the first person that says something about needing more time to prepare a case that's not going to have more time to be prepared puts everybody in the room in a really bad place. Because everything that hasn't been done, based upon the representations and assurances that we would get there, then becomes a powder burn on everybody's face at Mr. Wagner's expense, which we're not going to do. You're working, I appreciate this. I know I got good lawyers on both sides of this case. It's a pleasure, but I'm not going to let this case become me on the tip of the spear. The court system isn't designed to take responsibility when negotiations appropriately break down. We are months and months and months behind where you would be on a case that goes to trial with a death spec.
I understand everything you're saying, Judge, and so that there's complete disclosure. at a prior time on a prior judge, we were told, we were guided to stop mitigation because of cost issues. So that would be the only issue, potentially, if the agreement doesn't work out. However, I can make adjustments on that as well. With our experts, so to speak, and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, I'll circle back to that, I hope. What do you have on your list? Anything on your list, Mr. Hayes?
You touched them
Mr.
all.
Collins?
You touched them all for us, Your Honor.
You have a list going, Ms. Canepa?
No, Your Honor, I mean, yeah, we have another hearing set December 16th currently. And obviously, 100% respect the court's, I guess what I'm saying is, I think at some point, we're going to have to issue summons for jurors in this case. And so I don't know if December 16th is early enough. I mean, if that gives us enough time.
No,
with
you're
the
this-
January 3rd court date.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Well,
I'll have my venue decision before then, if that's what you're looking
Okay.
for.
okay,
No, I'm not waiting till the 16th.
okay. And, you know, we'll work on jury questionnaires and stuff too. I mean, all those things that
Sure.
we indicated, so. Okay, thank you, Ryan.
No, it's very tactful. Maybe unexpectedly tactful.
Maybe I don't want.
I'm sure that came from Mr. O'Brien.
I don't want to rush the court's decision.
Who, for the benefit of the record, has sat here for 40 minutes and not said a word, which is maybe a first time in ever.
That is a world record, Your Honor, and so the record's clear, Mr. O'Brien was not just a good prosecutor, he was a good defense attorney too. As he co-counseled the case when we discussed it with this, so. And there is no conflict, and we waive that conflict or anything like that, so. But he's an outstanding prosecutor and defense attorney.
Funny that his bio didn't reflect any defense work.
That's fairly recent, Your Honor.
Okay, I would like to make some record of negotiations with regard to pleas. I'm not suggesting anybody should plea Mr. Wagner, but there's a legal duty that if there's offers made by the state, that they be communicated to you. So I always, you'll hear me do this again, ask the lawyers if they've had negotiations. If there were negotiations, have they been communicated?
I have to make an important phone call. It's about my sister. I'll let you know what they say. I'll be right back.
To you, because hindsight is 20/20 and everybody wants the deal after it left. Once the horse leaves the barn, they want to ride it. It's too late. So I'm going to ask the state if they've made any plea offers. Just go yes or no.
Maybe,
If you can.
Yes.
You want to own this?
It may be more
Go with it.
clear. Your Honor, it's been given to us that they are, the government is always willing to listen to a potential plea, but we would have to bring that plea to them. The government has engaged us in different concepts of different possibilities, but it had to be firm from us to them before they would ever go to the victim's family to determine that. We've advised that of our client and putting a little bit more legwork into that lately, but that's where it is. So there is no specific offer, but they are open to suggestions, suggestions, so to speak, have to be firm, or at least to get them to go to the victim's family. I think that's kind of captured the negotiations back and forth so far.
Is that fair?
I think that's fair, yes.
We've talked about flat time, we've talked about other things, we've talked about different concepts, comparing and contrasting. And then each time we give those concepts to a client, he sometimes is very frustrated with us. So But we believe that that's our ethical duty to continue to do that, regardless of.
Well, 100%. That's why I'm going to make sure
Okay.
that your ethical duty is covered on the record, so you don't have to try to fish through otherwise confidential files and decide whether you can disclose. Because the answer is yes, but you got to be in a forum you don't want to be in. So like, we're not going to go there.
Understood then.
Like, that's for your benefit and your clients. Explain to me, if you could, in this evolving area of law, what you think your duty is to the victims. Now, this is for you folks back there, because I said the last go around that the state's attorneys don't represent you. That's not a new concept. You should have heard that like 100 times already. But I don't know what it means to the states. You get the benefit of hearing what I get to hear. So go, if you would.
Your Honor, I'm sure the court is familiar with the law surrounding victims' rights, and as a prosecutor, I am required to make sure they know of hearings. I am required to consult with them anytime I'm going to resolve a case. I am not bound by their wishes, but I mean, as far as legal duties to them, those are my legal responsibilities to the victim's family, is to make sure they know what's going on with the case. And yeah.
The reason I ask is Mr. Collins started it by saying he needed to give you a firm offer that you could take to the victims.
Yes.
Then it gets really murky, depending on the prosecutor and the venue, whether the victims have some sort of implied understanding that they get to make the call. I didn't hear you say that they make the call.
Legally, they don't get to make the call. Every prosecutor, right, handles it differently. And I would say, I also factor in my belief on how the case should be resolved or not be resolved. But I certainly, especially in a case of this magnitude and the loss to this family, I certainly am going to strongly factor in their opinions before I would resolve a case. It's different, say, right? Like if you have a rape victim who's going to have to go through the trial and be on the witness stand, and if, that person, that individual is willing to go through that, that's a strong testament that I should do it too. If she doesn't want to, or if they don't want to resolve it with a lower offense. All to say, Your Honor, it's, as a prosecutor, I feel that I should factor in their opinion, absolutely. But they do not get to determine whether or not the case is resolved in any given fashion.
Thank you. So this is me yakking at all you folks. Understand that you have constitutional rights, as does the defendant. And in some respects, they differ in their quality. So what the prosecutor just said in a nice sort of way, or what I think she just said, is she's going to communicate, try to meet your expectations. In the end, it's not your call, it's hers. Now I'm going to build on that a step further. Because what the prosecutor might say to me, or what the defense lawyers might say to the judge, equally isn't the outcome of the case. Like there's mutual recommendations that often come out of plea negotiations. And that's fine and that's appropriate. And my personal philosophy has been to not upset the card table when everybody deals the deck they want. So I think only one time in my life have I ever refused a plea agreement for what I thought was really good reason. That doesn't mean, however, that the lawyer should think I fell asleep and did exactly what they wanted. Maybe I'm talking to them and staring at you. Their recommendations are really important, but they aren't binding on the court. So they can both say the same thing, and I can go a different route because judges are supposed to have their own independence. Now, that applies in this case. It's equally applicable in the companion cases where I'm staring at plea agreements that have mutual recommendations that are helpful. I'm just trying to set the stage that nobody should assume anything moving forward. Mutual recommendations can be softened or hardened depending on how they play out. And I don't do this because I think I have the luxury. I say this because I have a duty to tell you of my independence. Statutory requirement, constitutional requirement to consider everything that's said by anybody that's relevant and then follow the law. Not do what my personal belief might be or my own fancy, but to follow the law. That's how we get there. Imperfect as it is, it's how we get there. So Ms. Canepa did a nice job. She set the stage for me to tell you she's going to work really hard. She'll try to represent your interest. And whenever it breaks down, if it breaks down, it's because at some point in time it's expected to or it's appropriate that it does. But her legal duty is to tell you what the heck's going on. So when I started this whole affair out by talking to Mr. Wagner about cutting him out of the private discussions in chambers, I did the same to you folks. Purposefully, and that's why we're not doing it that way today. We're going to get as much out in front of everybody. So there is this effective communication that takes the burden off the prosecutor to try to tell you what the heck happened. What else do you have? Anything from the defense, Mr. Hayes, Mr. Collins?
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Canepa?
No, Your Honor.
Dare I ask Mr. O'Brien if you have anything to say?
Your Honor, I think you know more about the case. Actually, I have a benefit because the wiretaps that were done in this case were issued in Franklin County. So as the applicant on the wiretaps, I have familiarity with the case prior to being appointed. But based on what I know so far about the trial aspect, I don't have anything additional.
So here are the orders coming out of today's hearing. On representation by the state of Ohio, the death penalty specification is dismissed. The case proceeds without that specification. All of the defendants' pending motions are dismissed because most of them were focused upon the death penalty, and then also the lack of anybody prosecuting the motions. I tried to make a record a long time ago, tell me what you need to do. So for benefit of the record, it's not the judge didn't get his work done, as he wasn't given the work to do. So all your pending pretrial motions are gone. The death penalty specification is gone. The death penalty specification is gone. I'm not on the tip of the spear. I understand, Ms. Canepa, your dilemma. Only to compound the dilemma, will I now tell you that I'm going to proceed to sentencing in advance of trial on the other cases. So I'm proceeding to sentencing. I'm going to ask the court staff to have Angela Wagner, the other Wagner case, set for sentencing. I'm done waiting.
Okay,
I'm
well,
done.
obviously, you know that I will be objecting to every single thing that you just said, so.
Totally should. I didn't expect to make anybody happy.
Your Honor, you can't dismiss a motion. We have not dismissed the specifications. We have not made a motion to dismiss the specifications.
And if you think I have to have motions, nothing would ever get done. I'm not trying to run this case until I think it's necessary for the court to run the case, not hear continued representations that we're going to get this thing negotiated when I'm now at 4 months waiting for something that was inevitable that has never happened. So in my impatience, I'm going to lead. And that's how I'm going to lead. And the nice thing is, I told you this 3 weeks sooner than I maybe had to. So I don't expect you to agree. You can have all the
Well, no,
objection you want.
To disagree is what you expect, because if you sentence the defendants, what happens legally to the state's ability to enforce their plea agreements?
Tell me why this, I know the answer, so do you. And it's found in State versus Gilbert.
Okay.
We all know
And
this.
so you're going to knowingly do that on a case where those two admitted to plotting for 4 months to kill 8 individuals, most of them while they slept.
I know the facts of the case. Thank you for the transcript. The problem is twofold.
Well, we're not going to trial on January 3rd then, obviously.
No, you have
because
this.
You can't dismiss suspects without a motion by the state. When there is more than sufficient evidence to support a death penalty specification in this case, because we have got the testimony, sworn testimony of his 2 co-defendants, that he participated in personally killed 3 people. So the court has no basis to do this, no legal basis to do it.
Now, when I start talking, can we assume that you won't? I get that you're upset. You don't get that the court's been hearing representations for months about the quality of your case and the cooperation of the state's witnesses that I'm getting ready to sentence, and their truthfulness, and that they're all locked in the bag, ready to go, solid case. The fact that you'll have this plea agreement worked out was supposed to have been done shortly after September, shortly after October. Every time we've met, I've asked and heard you represent, we're getting there, we're getting there. It was like somebody played a record today. We're getting there. Well, I'm on the tip of the spear for everything that you're not doing. So I'm telling you, we're not going forward with trial on a death penalty specification when the defense isn't ready because the state's not ready. I'm not assigning fault. I'm saying the clock ran out. The clock ran out. You know how this can play. I know how this can play. The next move is yours. I get that.
Sorry.
I get that. I'm just telling you that we're not going to pussyfoot around any longer with assurances of things that may never happen. Oh, by the way, if you don't get your agreement worked out, we're not going to trial anyway because there's 1,000 motions that got to be decided because everybody has said, we don't need all those motions decided. So I struck their motions because of your representations that we're going to get there. I get it. I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong. I'm saying the clock ran out.
Yeah.
So, do whatever you got to do. Like, I'm not going to journalize this tomorrow. The staff will go scheduling with all these guaranteed good cooperative witnesses you have lined up. I understand what Gilbert says.
Why are you trying to sabotage this case?
I'm not.
No, yes, you absolutely.
Here we go.
Sure,
Okay,
go
take the
ahead.
record.
If I may, address
Go
the
ahead.
court by the state. Your Honor, I understand the court's frustration, but the state cannot unilaterally force a defendant to enter into an agreement when there's ongoing discussions. I think the court properly can and should set a deadline if the court wants to set a deadline, but I have never seen a death penalty expected dismissed absent the state making the request, the defense making the request. I understood at least what the court said. You have unilaterally decided because the clock ran out, you're going to dismiss death penalty specs, and I just don't think the court has that authority or has a sufficient record should an interlocutory appeal be taken to support it. And so I think I would ask that the court give the parties until, this is what day, I lose track of days, till Monday to present to the court a written agreement before the court would issue the kind of order that you just described.
You could have till Monday. And thank you for the courtesy of giving me yet another assurance. I'm working with you as much as it sounded like I wasn't.
Yep.
I've worked
Another
with
assurance.
the lawyers to this point, short as it is. I get it. Everybody's been here since 2018, right?
Not everybody.
I'm the last guy on the bench, right? Criminal Rule 48B gives the court authority to announce in open court on the record the reasons for its dismissal of a case. It's an extraordinary remedy if you want to call the death penalty specification dismissal, but it's not outside the rules. I have to explain why. If I let this go longer and we don't get to the agreement, clearly anything that happens at trial is going to be reversed for all of the work that didn't get done because everybody said it wasn't. So the reason's going to be the lack of adequate time to do what needs to get done for a death penalty case to go forward. Everybody knows in the room, everybody's ineffective if this case goes to trial in January as a death penalty case. Mr. O'Brien, welcome to the party. Monday's great. Call me Monday afternoon saying we're really, really close. But at some point in time, since I've heard that for 4 months, I probably won't care. So like I'm telling you, we're out of time. I'm not taking sides except to say the system has to work. I'm not adverse to the state. I'm building this upon what I've heard for 4 months, that this isn't going to be a death penalty case. Now I have like people slamming their hands on the table, figuratively, saying that what an outrageous thing the court just did. I didn't do it. I only responded to the facts that were represented to me. Even again today, the lawyers are doing a fine job. They're working on where they want to be going. I'm telling you, we're going to go where they say we're going to go. Nobody's walking this back, including the possibility, Ms. Canepa, you're just being suckered by the defense lawyers who are trying to play this for a second trial. With all due respect, I'm not worried about these lawyers. I'm worried about their appellate counsel, who I don't even know, who often throw everybody in the room under the bus. So if you can work out a deal that makes me look like I didn't just overreach, you're welcome to. But Rule 48B is the duty of the court, the authority of the court to dismiss charges.
Based on merit.
I just gave it to you.
That's not merit.
No. You don't like the merit. So let's just agree to disagree. Let's just agree to disagree.
Prior to today, did the court give the state or the defendant a deadline on this agreement? Prior to today, did the court say, if you don't have a defendant's agreement, which is, again, an unorthodox thing, you're going to dismiss the death specifications unilaterally? Prior to today, was there any thought of sentencing the defendant? What is the court's reason for moving forward with sentencing on the defendant?
I don't owe anybody anything except to finish cases at my own discretion. I understand you don't want it that way. I understand that you would like to have witnesses.
Agreements were constructed before different courts who indicated they would abide by that. But now again, because you're the new judge in town, you come in here and you undo our prior agreements with different counsel that already been in the
I didn't do anything.
You're
I
telling
only
me
told you.
you know the ramifications of sentencing the co-defendants in this case.
Of course I do. Then why aren't you ahead of
prevent
me?
them from being witnesses for the state because they can say, I'm not testifying.
You're the one that said you had them all packaged up and ready to go. Now, I don't
Under
think.
the agreements, Your Honor, that you are seeking to undermine, and you think
No.
this is funny? There were 8 people murdered in the middle of the night.
How about we agree that you've been telling me for months to look for something that may not ever happen? I'm telling you, we're not going to go forward with a trial when everybody in the room is going to be ineffective based upon your representations and the defense's reputations. Not like the state did anything wrong.
I'm
We're
surprised he
not-
wasn't found in
You
contempt.
have this habit that's annoying.
Ooh.
It's conversational talk. I get it. I understand completely how this puts you in an awkward spot.
But you did it to yourself.
Awkward?
So let's just agree to disagree. I'm telling you, we're going to get decisive and we're going to get done.
I think the court is demonstrating complete bias in this case.
Of course you would say that because, and I don't have any
Because it's
bias. No, I have a duty to get this case done.
You
Well,
don't
if I
have,
understand correctly, the court has given us till Monday to present this agreement that is
Look at
yet
her,
to
she's
be
like, no, no,
produced,
no, no, no.
in which instance the court separating out the Gilbert issue, the court still be sentencing if that agreement is presented? the co-defendants?
I don't think the public understands that we're actually supposed to put in a certain order in how things get done. But the public does perceive delay. The public does see the courts as an institution of glacial movement. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong. There's a lot of intense work that has to get done to get cases to the trial and to the finish stage. I suspect everybody that's a victim wants to have a chance to tell me the hurt, the pain, the ramifications. And for years and years and years, they've had to wait. I suspect it would be cathartic, healthy for them to be able to finally speak, but they have to wait too. So the day for waiting is done. I can revisit on any occasion, any part of the case that's necessary. I haven't made my mind up on what anything should happen is. I told the victims I'm not bound by what the lawyers agree. Never have been, no court is, unless the plea agreement encompasses a contractual understanding, which I don't think happened. So I'm not going to go making decisions today on what I'm going to do with regard to sentencing, but I am going to schedule sentencings in advance of this trial. And then if everybody works out something, I can rethink, as I'm supposed to, in real time, what's appropriate under the facts. Under the circumstances and facts today, there can't be any more time for promises. It's put up or shut up time. I'm not biased here. This cuts both ways. It puts everybody in an awkward spot. But it's not about being happy. It's about being efficient and thorough and seeking finality, which somebody lost years ago because there's a lot of intense work to do. I get it. There's a process to go through. But this can't keep going the way it's not going. So I appreciate it. Work on it. Nail it down if you can. I'm not interested in anybody getting sued for being ineffective or having ethics issues. That cuts both ways. I just put the defense in a bad spot and she's arguing your case. Good luck if we try this case of the death penalty spec, because you're going to be screaming louder than she just was about the great injustice that just happened. So thanks to the lawyers, thanks to the court staff, the court reporter, we can go ahead and go off the record. Those will be the orders.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, they cut it. Oh, she stood there and argued with the sat there and argued with her own. Whoa, cancel. I don't know what the heck that was. She went and stood there and argued with her, I guess the lead DA. It took me a minute to catch on what was going on. And I was pretty shocked, y'all. Pretty shocked. Apparently, the DA or assistant DA, the state has been trying to get some agreement with the defense, and they were going for the death penalty, and they have not gotten it done over more than 4 months with this judge. And then there was a judge prior to that they had not gotten it done with. So as rough as this sounds, the state has not done their job. And he's like, look, I'm the third and the last. We're moving. And so it is not a timely trial. If you keep having to delay and you keep promising the court, When you tell the judge you're going to do something, you have a darn good reason why you didn't. And just keep saying, well, we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there, but there's no gotten there. I can see his frustration. What got me more than anything is you can disagree with the judge. There's remedies for that. You can file a motion for him to remove himself. You can go up the chain of command. You can do all that. But her behavior in court, if I was the judge at one point, I would have found her in contempt. They do take years. They do. No. I don't know anything about this case. I know absolutely nothing about this case. And so I did pull up a timeline if you want me to go through that, but there's a couple things I want to say real quick. I'm not following the P. Diddy case. I have my reasons, but there's a huge announcement that I'll tell you guys because I know a lot of you are paying attention. The federal judge said that he would not consider evidence obtained during a sweep of Sean Diddy Combs' jail cell at his upcoming bail hearing, representing a win for the musical mogul. Judge Sir Subramanian, I don't know how to say it, the judge ruled that the prosecution will need to destroy its 19-page copies of the notes obtained by the sweep. Combs appeared in court, notably without shackles, on Tuesday, November 19th, seemingly more relaxed than at previous hearings. The hearing was called after the defense made an accusation on Monday night, filing that Combs' attorney-client privilege had been violated when the items were seized from his cell during a Bureaus of Prisons sweep, which the music mogul's attorney called outrageous government conduct and due process violation. The judge did agree. The defense further claimed that the seizure of included notes that Combs had written to his lawyers concerned defense strategies. When we visited him in jail, we had lists, said Combs, the attorney, on Tuesday. Everything in these pads are things we discussed, trial strategies, who we should speak to, undermine witness, etc., etc. The prosecution argued that most of these items were taken during the sweep, which the government says was pre-planned at the facility before Combs' arrest. Doesn't matter. If it's a legal notepad and it's legal documents, they can't take it. So there you go. He had a huge win on that front. What happened to 8-year-olds? I didn't realize it happened in 16. Yeah. I don't think they had DP on their table, like I said. So let me pull this up. I have a rundown, a timeline document that I created quickly so we could catch up on the case. Okay. So Pike County unaliving is the largest unaliving investigation in Ohio's history. On April 16, 2016, they found 8 persons in a trailer unalived in Pike County. 7 belonged to the same family. 1 was a fiance. After 2.5 years, the arrest tied to the brutal unaliving members of another local family, the Wagners, who had a business and personal ties with the rodents, the deceased, now face trial for unaliving. Angela Wagner, 48, her husband, George Billy Wagner III, the guy we just saw, 47 then. Their 2 sons, George Wagner IV, age 27 then, and Edward Jake Wagner, 26 then, each have been indicted in 8 counts of unaliving, aggravated unaliving. So I think what I'll do is do a whole lot more in-depth run through. I don't know if I want to do that today, but let me see. Angela Wagner had a plea deal. She walked calmly into the courthouse and on Friday back then, her and her attorney sat at the table. A 50-year-old is now admitting helping the mastermind, the unaliving of 8 peoples of the highest profile investigation in Ohio history, pled guilty Friday of a variety of 14 lesser charges and agreed to a 30-year mandatory prison sentence in relating to the unaliving. So wonderful. I'll have to talk to you later about that. And so she got 30 years on an agreement. And then George Wagner IV was sentenced him to 8 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus an additional 121 years in prison, and concluding this to be the longest, coldest criminal trial in Ohio history. And then the other Wagner, now 31, his family, let's see, the victims was Hannah Roden, 19. The victims are her parents, Christopher and Donna Roden, her brother, Clarence Frankie, Christopher Jr., Clarence Roden, fiance, Hannah. Oh, wow. Do we want to do a watch this trial again? I'm trying to look for. Okay. 30 years, 8 consecutive. I'm looking for the other brother. Okay, the other brother was sentenced with no hope of parole to life. So the father is the only one that is not been tried as of today. This is the trial that we watched right now. I'm considering that, watching that, going through and finding some videos. There was on Oxygen TV a full series of it, but I can't do that. But this is crazy, y'all. Yeah, that's an issue. Sound quality may be an issue, but let's do this. Since we have, I'm game if you are. Let's do this. I would like to see some. I'm going to watch it anyway, so I might as well watch it live. What do you think? Y'all good with that? I think this will have good sound. So we're going to watch this, and then we'll kind of see where we are.
Piketon is a small town in southern Ohio, 90 miles east of Cincinnati, with a population of...
Wait a minute. I got to say this. I want to catch you up on my sister, so I'm going to do this hopefully without crying. Okay? For most of you know, I want to do a fundraiser for my sister. I'm trying to figure out how. So if any of y'all are good at that, please DM me. It's important. It's getting financially critical, but we are all trying to help her, and it's getting very critical financially. She apparently had a TIA. She has an extremely bad bladder infection that is causing a lot of problems. And then her lungs, thank God, they don't think she has pneumonia, but her lungs are extremely inflamed, so she can't breathe. Her oxygen levels without assistance gets down to in the 60% percentiles. The other thing is that they found a hole in her heart. I'm not sure. I don't know right now what that means. They don't think at this point that it's affecting her oxygen, but I guess time will tell. They're going to have to do more tests and all that. But things are not good. And I'm going to be up there with her later today, visiting with her, probably just while she sleeps. She's just so worn out. And she's very weak, but praise God, we don't think the cancer has spread to her brain yet. They're not able to get an MRI because when she lays down, she's in excruciating pain, to the point that they would have to fully medically sedate her for the length so she doesn't move. And they think that would do more harm than good at this point. A PET scan will show if there's more cancer. So a PET scan will have to be done in the future. They're going to get a hold of her oncologist and discuss the plan forward. One of the biggest things we need to do is get her lungs operating again. One of those may be, of course, there's a prednisone or steroids to help get that inflammation down. She is struggling tremendously to put words together, just like a stroke victim would. We don't have any kind of physical paralyzation or anything like that. But yeah, it's very difficult right now. That said, I mean it. I mean, I need to do a fundraiser and I don't know what to do. So if anybody has ideas, let's go over to Discord and we'll talk about that. But thank you guys for your warm wishes, your prayers, good thoughts, whatever it is you do, please keep them coming. I expected her to be like this when she did her chemo, and she came through that far better than I thought she would. So for her to do a crash right now was real scary to me. Thank you for the prayers. She and her husband were very emotionally touched when I told them that we were praying for them and all of that. So keep it going. Keep it going. Okay, let's get into this before I start crying.
Just over 2,000 people. In the heart of Appalachia, where families can trace their lineage back generations. Everyone knows everyone. No one is a stranger. And when someone is in need, all they have to do is turn to their neighbor. Bad things happen everywhere, even in small, tight-knit towns. But in April of 2016, something happened that no one had ever seen before, and it shook them to their core.
Police in southern Ohio have a dragnet out for a killer who executed 8 members of one family.
The motive for the killings remains unclear tonight, but the Roden family was clearly targeted. 8 of them killed execution style.
It occurred during the night. We have victims who are in bed. The one mom apparently was killed in her bed with the 4-day-old right there.
They've executed 5 search warrants, 4 of those being the crime scenes there on Union Hill Road.
I spoke with the family. It's very evident that they were a target of this horrible crime.
A rural town in terror after 7 adults and 1 teenager all shot execution style. The first 3 homes where the bodies were found are within a couple of miles of one another on a sparsely populated stretch of road, while the 8th body, a man, was found in a house within 30 miles.
I do not intend to give out one piece of information that in any way will endanger the prosecution of this case or in any way will slow down what our job is.
We're very early in this. We have multiple crime scenes, very horrific crime scene here. So I am not going to rule out the fact that we do not have someone or someone's that's out armed and dangerous.
8 members of one family in 4 separate locations, all murdered execution style at roughly the same time. It was a crime that most people only experience through movies, but the members of this quiet, hardworking town would soon find themselves thrust into the national spotlight, unwillingly living through a real-life murder mystery and mourning a family who had been a fixture in their community. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Crime Weekly. I'm Stephanie Harlow.
And I'm Derek Lavasser.
So I hope that you have your notebook ready for this case. It's going to be a multi-parter, deep dive case into the Roden family massacre that happened in April of 2016. This case is very intensive. There's a lot of people involved.
Connect to your community like never before with Very Local. Stay informed with local news from the team you trust.
Let's get straight to the scene here with breaking news.
Explore original series and specials.
I've never been rock climbing just because.
The Earth type of place, nestled in the heart of Appalachia, where families can trace their lineage back generations. Everyone knows everyone. No one is a stranger. And when someone is in need, all they have to do is turn to their neighbor. Bad things happen everywhere, even in small, tight-knit towns. But in April of 2016, something happened that no one had ever seen before, and it shook them to their core.
Police in southern Ohio have a dragnet out for a killer who executed 8 members of one family.
The motive for the killings remains unclear tonight, but the Roden family was clearly targeted. 8 of them killed execution style.
It occurred during the night. We have victims who are in bed. The one mom apparently was killed in her bed with the 4-day-old right there.
They've executed 5 search warrants, 4 of those being the crime scenes there on Union Hill Road.
I spoke with the family. It's very evident that they were a target of this horrible crime.
A rural town in terror after 7 adults and 1 teenager all shot execution style. The first 3 homes where the bodies were found are within a couple of miles of one another on a sparsely populated stretch of road, while the 8th body, a man, was found in a house within 30 miles.
I do not intend to give out one piece of information that in any way will endanger the prosecution of this case or in any way will slow down what our job is.
We're very early in this. We have multiple crime scenes, very horrific crime scene here. So I am not going to rule out the fact that we do not have someone or someone's that's out armed and dangerous.
8 members of one family in 4 separate locations, all murdered execution style at roughly the same time. It was a crime that most people only experience through movies, but the members of this quiet, hardworking town would soon find themselves thrust into the national spotlight, unwillingly living through a real-life murder mystery and mourning a family who had been a fixture in their community. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Crime Weekly. I'm Stephanie Harlow.
And I'm Derek Lavasser.
So I hope that you have your notebook ready for this case. It's going to be a multi-parter, deep dive case into the Roden family massacre that happened in April of 2016. This case is very intensive. There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of peripheral people involved as well that are going to be pulled in. There's a lot of crime scene information, ballistics, blood spatter, DNA. It's a very, very, very intriguing, but yet complicated case. And this case has been recommended by so many people for us to do. So many people have requested it. I actually started looking into the Roden family massacre right when we started Crime Weekly. So I think around that same month that we actually put out our first episode, I was writing down cases that I wanted to do for Crime Weekly in the future, and this was one of them. And I started researching it, and then I realized how intensive it was and how deep it went. And at that point, we weren't doing 8, 9, 10-part series. We weren't even really doing multi-parts at all. Because remember, I think we did the Watts family case in one episode at that point, because we were still doing single cases and single
Still
episodes.
regret that one, by the way.
Yeah.
I cringe every time I hear about that case. That was our first episode. That was when we were working under a different set of circumstances where we were trying to do one episode cases.
And we were trying to fulfill the needs of others that we were working for. But now we can do our own thing. And now I said,
just were like, no, we ain't doing that no more.
Now we're like, we're just going to go ham and do as many parts as possible. But
20-part series.
I know people are like, oh, we don't like the long series, but most people say they do. Most people say they actually do prefer that and they enjoy it. And I prefer it and enjoy it. And this case calls for it.
Yeah.
So,
we will mix in a couple short ones here and there. Like, especially
I'll do a short one next.
Yeah. We're going to, we'll mix in one. It might be 1 or 2 episodes if it warrants it. We're not going to not cover a case because it's short.
Not one. Like 2 at the least.
Stephanie.
Because we do Crime Weekly News. That's like our one.
Yeah, that's our one. Overall, we let the cases dictate how long they are. We don't put that's why some people are like, how many parts is this going to be? In most cases, we don't know. So it all depends on how much dialogue we get into. Sometimes we go off, but I think that's what's great about podcasting is you guys have the opportunity to go where you want to go, whatever you enjoy. Some people don't like the long form. We're not necessarily going to cater to that. We have to do what we enjoy doing. Otherwise, we would get burnt out and we wouldn't do it. So that's, there's different strokes for different folks. We may not be for everyone's cup of tea, but I think for the most part, especially, and I know I said it last episode, especially after the feedback from Dan Markel's series, you guys really embraced that one. And I felt like we got back to the roots of Crime Weekly and really just went for it. And it came out great as far as how we produced that episode and how it ultimately ended up. So
the way I look at it is it's like a college intensive course on one case. So when you leave our retelling of each case, you'll pretty much know a lot about it. You'll know this case. You can talk about it, extensively with anybody who you want to chat about it with. And there's going to be a lot about the case that you know. And so, we're not here to just retell a story for entertainment purposes. We're here to tell what happened and hopefully learn something for it and pick it apart and put the puzzle together in the way that honestly a law enforcement agency would do it. We're trying to look at each piece of evidence. We don't want to just sit here and be like, oh, they were murdered and tell you all the gory details and then not really give you any context to humanize these people. We're here to actually and this is a very sad case because we have 8 people in one family just wiped out in one night.
Yeah. On the surface, just listening to the trailer, sounds like a collaborative effort by one or more people. So we'll get into it and we'll see where it goes.
So on the morning of April 22nd, 2016, 36-year-old Bobby Jo Manley went about her typical weekday routine. She got up at 6 a.m. She woke up her 15-year-old daughter for school, got the daughter on the bus by 7 a.m., and then she headed over to the Union Hill Road home of her brother-in-law, Christopher Roden Sr., to feed his dogs and chickens. Now, Christopher Roden had been married to Bobby's sister, Dana, and although Dana and Chris had gotten a divorce in 2007, they shared 3 children together, and they were all still very close. When Bobby Jo arrived, she was, on autopilot, like we all are when we do something that's become a habit. And she left her cell phone charging in her car as she approached the front door of the trailer. Bobby Jo went for the door handle, but she was surprised when she found it locked. Chris Sr. was usually up and about by then. He usually unlocked the door for her because he knew she was coming, but it was locked this morning. And she also found it odd that Roden's 2 dogs were outside on the porch because they were usually inside with their owner. Bobby Jo let herself into the trailer with the key that Chris Sr. had given her, and she walked into something she never expected. A trail of blood in the front room led her to a back bedroom where she found the bodies of 40-year-old Christopher Roden Sr. and his cousin, 37-year-old Gary Roden. There was blood everywhere. In a panic, Bobby Joe fled the trailer and retrieved her cell phone, calling 911 at 7:49 a.m.
I think my brother-in-law's dead. What's his name? Chris Roden and Gary Roden. Chris and Gary Roden? Both of them in there look like they're dead. You think they're both dead? I think they're both dead. Looks like someone has beat the fuck out of them.
So if you heard in that clip, Bobby Joe, she's very clearly distressed. She's very, very upset. And she says, I think that there's some dead men here. My brother-in-law is dead. And it looks like somebody, beat the hell out of them, basically. So on the same property, within walking distance, Chris Roden's 20-year-old son, Frankie Roden, lived in a trailer with his 2 children and his fiancée, Hannah Gilley. And while Bobby Joe waited for the police to arrive, she went over to wake Frankie up to let him know what had happened. When she knocked on the trailer door, it was not Frankie who answered. It was his 3-year-old son, Brentley, who told Bobby Joe that his daddy was playing zombie in the bedroom. Bobby Joe rushed into the bedroom to find another horrific scene. Frankie and his 20-year-old fiancée, Hannah, were in bed. They had both been shot to death, and the bed they were laying in was soaked in blood. Frankie was lying on his back, but Hannah was curled up on her right side, facing her silent, but thankfully still alive 6-month-old son, Ruger. According to Bobby Joe, the baby was soaked in the blood of his parents, and he was stroking the chest of his dead father. And Bobby Joe also believed, based on the position that Hannah Gilley was lying in, she had been nursing her son and then fallen asleep while nursing him, and she was killed in that position. Not long after this, Bobby Joe's brother, James Manley, went a bit down the road to the trailer of his sister, and there he found 37-year-old Dana Roden dead, along with her 2 children, 19-year-old Hannah Mae Roden and 16-year-old Christopher Roden Jr. So Bobby Joe and James and Dana are all siblings. Bobby Joe was Chris Roden Sr.'s sister-in-law. Chris Roden Sr. was married to Dana, who's Bobby Joe and James's sister. So at that time, they were living on the same road. Chris Roden Sr. and Dana Roden living on the same road. Chris Roden Sr. lived with his cousin Gary, and Dana lived with her and Chris Roden Sr.'s 2 kids, Hannah Mae and Chris Jr. And then their other son, Frankie, or Clarence is his first name. He goes by Frankie, his middle name. He was in a trailer on his father's property where he lived with his fiancée, Hannah. It's confusing because Frankie's sister's name is Hannah. His fiancee's name is Hannah. He lived there with his fiancée, Hannah, and their 2 sons, if that helps kind of explain the whole situation. The trailer was covered in blood, but the most shocking detail of this crime scene was the fact that next to Hannah Mae in bed was her daughter, Kylie, who she had just given birth to 4 days prior. Hannah was the mother to another child, a 3-year-old named Sophia, but luckily the toddler was with her father that day. As rumors of these horrific crime scenes began to make their way around town, members of the Roden family gathered at a nearby church so they could be together if any news or updates came in. And one of these people at the church, one of these family members, was a man named Donald Stone. So hours later, in another trailer, a 10-minute drive from the Union Hill Road location, another 911 call came in at 1:26 p.m. This was Donald Stone, because once he'd heard what was going on in Union Hill Road, he went to check on his cousin, Kenneth Roden. And Donald found Kenneth dead as well, shot once through the eye with $1,000 scattered around him.
It's all this stuff that's on the news. I just found my cousin with a gunshot wound.
Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about all 8 of the victims, where they were found, etc., what are you thinking so far?
Okay, so qualifier here. We were just talking about this as we're editing this episode, and I asked you, is this case solved? Because I didn't know or not. I've heard of the case, but I know people always get up in an uproar when I say I haven't investigated or researched the case that I have nothing to do with, but spoiler alert, I haven't. So my initial thought on the surface is definitely connected. I know, shocker, light bulb, Sherlock Holmes, here I come.
Like all of these deaths are connected.
All these deaths are connected.
Yes.
Appears to be done by someone, I don't want to say professional, but someone who has an experience with killing animals or something along that lines. This was well executed, not taking in consideration the actual executions of these individuals. Someone who cleaned up after themselves in the sense where anyone who could directly link them to the crimes was executed. That brings me back to the two teenagers who I don't think necessarily are going to be involved with whatever we end up undercover, finding out here, but they're witnesses, so they got to go too. This person still, or people who are involved, although this may be personal, there's still some level of consciousness there where all the children under a certain age were left alone.
Alive. Yeah.
They were spared. So there's some level of emotional connection to that person where they're not a complete sociopath and they're just going through this whole thing, just killing anyone and everyone that they can find for the gratification of it. It appears to be deliberate, it appears to be directed, and it may be tied to one specific person, but I don't think you go off and kill an entire family if it's just a vendetta. I don't think so. I mean, it seems like this was a thought out, premeditated plan. And I know you haven't got into the specifics of the cause or manner of deaths for anyone other than Kenneth, but I would assume that we're going to find that they were all killed in a similar manner, which would lead us to believe that one or maybe a couple people were involved, but they're all connected in some way, shape, or form. That's all I'll say for now. I don't really have a ton here, but crazy on the surface.
When you say the two teenagers, you don't believe that they were involved. They were just kind of collateral damage. You mean 16-year-old Chris Jr. and 19-year-old Hannah, his sister, right?
Yes. Now,
Okay.
19 years old, because again, we're cleaning this episode up, but I actually had to pause with Stephanie to write all these names down, make sure I got all the connections. I say that where they may not be indirectly involved, but also 16 years old. They're old enough to drive a car. 19 years old, definitely old enough to be involved in something, whether it's criminal in nature. I will say this without knowing anything about this case. In these situations, in my experience, and it's limited having something like this, of this magnitude, there's usually a criminal element to it, right? And it could be a competitor. It could be someone that was crossed during a business deal. Could be a lot of things. So I won't go too far down that trail, but it sounds on the surface like there may be something here that's more, there's more than just the fact that these people were executed for no other reason than someone didn't like them. There's there's definitely more to the story.
Definitely. There definitely is. Let's take our first break and we'll be right back. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating better every day easy. Wherever tomorrow takes you, be ready with pre-prepared, chef-crafted, and dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. You're going to have over 35 different options a week to choose from, including keto, calorie-smart, vegan, and veggie, and more. There's even more to enjoy with over 55 nutrition-packed add-ons that help make your weekly meal planning even more delicious. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and have a feel-good week of meals ready to go. I love Factor because meal planning's never been something I've been good at sustainably. I'll do it for a couple weeks and then I get bored. But with Factor, everything is ready for you and there's a lot of variety, which keeps you from getting bored. They're doing it for you, so you don't have to exert that energy. And it's really, really delicious too. You can fuel up with Factor's restaurant quality meals that are ready to heat and eat wherever you are, whenever you want. They have snacks, smoothies, and more, so you can discover a wide variety of easy options for they brought in the BCI.
The reason I asked that question is because although Piketon may not have the resources or the experience to process a crime scene like this, or even do all the interviews that are going to need to be conducted with how expansive this investigation is going to be, the local law enforcement officers, I could be completely wrong here. We're going to find out it's not, but I feel like in this type of case, based on the topography and how you laid out where the trailers were, whoever's involved with this has to have a familiarity with the area. I'm not going to go as far as yet and saying they're locals, but I won't be surprised if you tell me that the people involved with this are locals because of where it took place and because of what you just said, where everyone knows everyone. The Roden family, if there was any issues going on, if they were involved in any criminal activity, locals are going to know. If they were having any type of altercation or dispute with other individuals from that community, they're going to know. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to be able to bring up some potential motives very fast. The FBI or the Bureau of Criminal Investigations, anybody from outside that community would not have access to that information. More importantly, they don't have the trust of that local community to obtain any details they need to try to find potential suspects. So just want to put that out there. Although Pike County may, again, not have the best resources, they are going to be critical in this case, I would imagine.
They were critical in this case, absolutely. And I mean, it just is, it doesn't even come down to like more skill or more knowledge. It comes down to more manpower, more hands on deck.
Covering everything. Yep.
Yeah. And they eventually did have to like move because the crime scenes were so far apart. They had to take all the trailers and move them off the property and put them in like this warehouse so that they could, and the sheriff got like a lot.
What was that about, Dr. Bullbutter? Ada, FF, no. Are you talking about the commercial that's on their end? I did finally realize it. What's going on? What did I do? What did I do?
A lot of shit for it. You know, he was like, I know people are not going to like this decision, but just from a functional point of view, like we have to process these scenes and we have to continue looking through them and we have to continue returning to them for the simple fact of like, what's the inside look like? How could this have happened? And we
That's
can't
brilliant,
just keep,
by the way.
Yeah.
I imagine that, having multiple crime scenes that you can stick under one roof.
Yeah, because they processed them like for forensics where they were, right? So they did that.
Yeah.
But once that's done, now you need to, he felt that he needed to move them to this warehouse so that they could continue returning to these trailers and sort of reenact or recreate what had happened based on the locations of things. And
that's great.
And I think it was smart, but people didn't like it. They thought it was going to mess with evidence and things like that. And I mean, who knows, but.
Dr. Henry Lee told me this. Every scene is contaminated the minute you arrive. Every scene. And so it's one of those things you want to minimize that contamination while obtaining whatever evidence you're trying to obtain. So I'm sure they did a cursory search of the surrounding area with the trailers and did a perimeter of everything and made sure that while these suspect were fleeing the area, they didn't drop anything or leave any type of DNA behind in the outer skirts of the trailers. But once you do all that, you bring the trailers and you ensure that the integrity of the whatever evidence you do find is intact. If that's a secured warehouse or facility, you could go back time after time again, and the defense can't say, well, you know, how do we know someone didn't break in or go inside that trailer while you were gone?
So that's kind of the problem. It wasn't secured.
Oh, okay. I'm getting ahead of myself.
The whole time.
Okay.
You know, and I think they probably had like alarms and stuff, but I remember it.
They didn't have like a law enforcement officer there around
They did
the
not
clock.
have a physical person there around the clock. And he was like, we can't, they've been there for months. We can't have somebody be there night and day. But I mean, once again, all the main evidence
was done at the scene.
Has already been collected, right? The shell casings, they've taken pictures of everything. So at that point, you took pictures of everything, you collected everything, you did everything properly initially. So now I just feel like having the trailers there was so that they could get a lay of the land and return to them and kind of just check things out if they had questions. It's better than, I don't know, like destroying the crime scene like they did at Idaho State University, right?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. I'm saying, as you were saying it, like it sucks that they didn't have someone there the whole time. But logistically, I can see how, again, if it's a secured facility where they have locks and stuff on the door, and I don't know. I get it. I can see both sides of the argument, but there does come a practical standpoint where you can't have around the clock coverage because it gets very expensive.
Yeah. And I mean, like, once again, this is a small department, so they don't have a ton of resources. Now, here's a kind of little twist to the case, because as the police and BCI are processing these crime scenes, within just a few days, they discovered 3 marijuana grow operation locations found at 2 of the 4 crime scenes. So they found a shed behind Kenneth Roden's trailer and he used the shed to grow plants in. And then on Chris Roden Sr.'s land, plants were found in a big barn on his property as well as in the attic of his home. And I think the overall total of number of plants they found was like 200, which I think came out, if they sold it, would be like over $400,000 in profit. Now, this initially led the public and even law enforcement to speculate on whether or not these murders had been drug related. Piketon may have been a small, tight-knit community, but it was also one of the most economically distressed areas in Ohio. And with jobs sometimes hard to come by, residents would turn to illicit activities to support their families. Well, when you think about drug trafficking, you don't like immediately think about, Ohio. It doesn't immediately come to your mind, but it is an agricultural area and marijuana is a cash crop in many places in Ohio. There were other drugs coming in, meth, cocaine, pharmaceuticals, but Pike County happened to be very close to US Route 23. I think they call it the Heroin Highway. It's a known drug trafficking roadway that runs from Florida to Michigan, and it passes through many large-scale drug markets like Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, and Pittsburgh. So Dan Tierney, a spokesperson for the Attorney General's office, told CNN that in 2016, the hilly and wooded area of Southeast Ohio between Interstate 23 and Interstate 70 was known as a good hiding spot for drug activity for local growers and drug cartels alike.
So real quickly, and I know I alluded to this when you were like, hey, Derek, what are your initial thoughts? So this is without even knowing this, right? But here's my issue. And the picture you're painting right now, I think some people might be listening or watching going, oh, well, here we go. That's the connection. They came in and said, we don't want you selling in this area. And they took out their competitor, right? But to be honest with you, relatively speaking, in comparison to what you're dealing with out there, 200 plants, that's a speck on a page. That's nothing.
Yes, exactly.
So I will say, even though you're laying out this picture of how this could be connected from a narcotics detective perspective, I will tell you 200 plants doesn't move the needle, and most likely the cartel's that's a blip on a radar. They're not going to care about that. So I gotta, if there's like a bigger distribution thing that you're going to tell me about down the road, maybe, but $400,000 may sound like a lot of money. It's really not, and relatively speaking, from a drug perspective.
Okay, well, the thing is, I think that when they were looking at what happened, the way that these 8 people were shot, kind of like in an orchestrated fashion, right? It looks like this is like a contracted
like
thing,
a hit.
professional, like somebody who kills people professionally.
Right. They've done this once or twice. That's what I was saying earlier. Like they've been around the block.
And given that this is a small town, everyone knows everyone, things like this don't happen. Like you might have bar fights, you might even have someone killing one person over something, but you're not going to see this kind of thing. Yes, I believe it was easy for people at that time to say, oh, this could have been, Mexican cartels. In fact, they found a Mexican grow operation just a few miles away from the Roden family crime scenes, at least the ones on Union Hill Road. And given the nature of the crimes, the money located on and around Kenneth Roden's body, like that money being sprinkled there kind of made it seem like it was financially motivated. So it did look like this might have been a contracted hit carried out by people who knew what they were doing. However, there were a few things about the murders that didn't add up when it came to cartel-style killings. It was true that any cartel presence in the area might have viewed the Roden's grow operation as a threat to their business, but the fact that 3 children had been found unharmed and alive at the scenes made investigators really doubt this cartel angle, because typically in cartel killings like this, they don't leave anybody alive. Not the children, not the animals. And there was 3 dogs, 2 at Chris Roden Sr.'s property and 1 at Kenneth's property that were left alive and outside, and they didn't kill those dogs. And you think Mexican cartels, they're coming up just so the dog doesn't bark, doesn't potentially attack. They're going to take them out. Now,
think about why they do that, Stephanie. Right?
So the dog doesn't bark or attack.
Well, no, think about why the cartels kill everyone, including the children. It's not necessarily, well, it is to obviously tell, get rid of their competition.
Send a message.
It's to send a message.
Yeah,
it's
we don't care. We'll take everything from you.
So listen, if you want to play games, you may not care about your life if you get caught by us, but you probably care about the people in your life. And if we find out you're crossing us or you're taking away from our business, we will kill you and your families. We don't care who they are, how young they are. we will take out everybody connected to your lineage. So it deters people from stepping on their toes, knowing that, hey, if I screw up, everyone I know and love and care about is gone. So that's why they do that. They'll kill babies. They don't care, to let everyone know, cross us, and your generational, there'll be generational ramifications for your actions.
Yes, and in general, I mean, there's no personal tie.
No, there's no
right?
emotion to it.
Yeah, there's no emotion to it. They don't know
Right.
these people. They don't care
Means
about
to an
these
end.
babies. Yeah. And the fact that the dogs were left alive made people think, well, did these dogs recognize who was walking up to these crime scenes? Or did the people walking up to the crime scenes, people or person, know that this dog wasn't going to attack because they'd had interactions with this dog before? So that kind of made people, I guess, sit on the
Another
fence. Like
dog?
the way it was done seemed very much like something the cartel would do, but then there was
Or
just these
doggies.
little nuances that wouldn't allow law enforcement to buy it 100%.
Yeah, I think more so, maybe not cartel, maybe another local drug dealer, or as we were saying earlier, there's some type of emotional connection to this where the rodents, we're going to find out, have something going on in their lives that they're all involved in that someone clearly didn't like.
And honestly, in that area, it seemed like everybody kind of was growing weed or selling drugs or doing something like that. And there was lots of people that were interviewed in these early days when they found these grow operations. And these people were like people who lived in Piketon. And they said, yeah, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. You know, lots of people have these little side businesses to make some extra money. And it is, you know, kind of well known that in the Appalachian Mountain areas, drugs are rampant. So it wasn't as if the rodents were alone in what they were doing. And none of them had ever been in any real trouble or caused issues for law enforcement in the past. Sheriff Reeder said, quote, "I have never been involved with that family in a criminal nature, and I've been in law enforcement locally for 20 years. End quote. In fact, the family were very well loved by their community. They were known to be friendly and giving, always willing to lend a hand or help someone in need, even though they themselves were not always doing well financially." A Piketon resident, Kendra Jordan, said, quote, "Everyone knows that family. They're involved in everything, and they're at every event that's going on in town. Just about see them anywhere you went." End quote.
Yeah, so this is great to know. This is obviously great to know. And again, it goes back to talking about local officials being able to verify this type of information because they've had personal interactions with them. And so on the surface here, obviously there's maybe something we don't know about yet, but knowing that the rodent family in general, not really known for their criminal activities, not known to get involved with bad people, that's interesting to me. Because the weed thing doesn't bother me, to be honest with you. It really doesn't. I've
If it was like cocaine or something, you might have been more like
cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, any of those. And also the plants themselves. Yeah, clearly they were selling it. Let's be honest. 200 plants, that's more than personal use.
Or growing it to sell, right?
Right. They were growing it to sell it, right? And so there's clearly some type of distribution element to it, but it doesn't sound like these guys were hardened criminals that were some type of huge drug operation that was just under the noses of law enforcement and they didn't know it. That's at least what I'm picking up here. 2,000 people, like you said earlier. If they were doing something, more than likely law enforcement would have known about it.
Yeah, and some members of their family seemed to know that they were doing it while.
Whoa, wait a minute, guys. We got something that just popped up. I don't know if you are aware of this. I just got this information. I saw it, but I didn't understand. I was sleeping when it came across my screen. Got up to go to the bathroom, and all of a sudden, it didn't click, and it clicked. The Illinois Supreme Court on Thursday announced it had overturned the 2021 felony conviction of Jesse Smollett, Smollett. I'm bad at names. A television actor who became even more of a household name 5 years ago after the prosecutors said he falsely reported that he had been a victim of a violent hate crime. Jury convicted Mr. Smollett, a former actor in the United States network show Empire in 21, 5 counts of disorderly conduct. He was sentenced to 150 days in jail, ordered to pay $25,000 fines, along with $120,106 in restitutions to the city of Chicago. by the fifth season of Empire, the actor was earning $100,000 per episode, per recorded by the Washington Post. The justice did not deny that Smollett, a black man who identifies as a gay, had indeed staged a hate crime and publicly lied about the attack. They wrote that they were overturned the case because of a prosecutorial issue, a due process violation during the years of high-profile litigation and wrangling. Wow, we are aware of the case has general significant public interest and that it may be, many people were dissatisfied with the resolution of the original case and believed it to be unjust. The court wrote in its decision, nonetheless, what will be more unjust is the resolution of any one criminal case would be holding from the court that the state was not bound to honor agreements upon which people have adamantly relied upon. This is a developing story. So, and Botham Jean's family awarded $98 million by a Dallas jury. If you don't know about that, the family of Botham Jean, the Dallas man who was unalived in his apartment by a Dallas police officer in 2018, was awarded $98.6 million by the jury on Wednesday. The city had hired, this was, yeah. So, George, who was fired from the Dallas Police Department shortly after she fatally shot Jean, was found guilty in October of 19 of unaliving her neighbor. The testimony said she was mistakenly entering Jean's apartment on September 6, 18. I remember this while thinking it was her own apartment and shot him because she believed he was an intruder and she was under the influence of something. So, wow. I just thought we'd have a little bit of a break. I was afraid to say because of politics. I don't think it's political. It's just criminal news. No, we're not going to voice political views on it, but it's important news.
While others, because there's a lot of extended rodent family in this area, right? That's another thing. Like they have lots of. You've got Dana's siblings and her father who live in the area. You've got a bunch of rodent cousins and half brothers and half sisters and stuff living there. So there's a lot of people who are related to the rodent victims in some way. And some of them are like, no, we had absolutely no idea that they were doing that. And some of the family members knew. So it didn't seem like they were trying to hide it. It was just kind of like, if you happen to find out about it, or if you happen to see it or know about it, they wouldn't hide it, but they weren't also like spreading it around to everybody. But once again, many people in this town and in this area were doing the same thing. So why would the rodents be isolated and kind of targeted for doing something that many others were doing?
Unless it's a competitive thing, but that just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. 200 plants. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we're first episode in here, halfway through the script.
It's so much.
Yeah, I'm assuming this isn't the meat and potatoes of it. There's probably a lot more to the story.
There's a lot more to the story, but before we continue on, let's take a quick break. Most of you have probably heard us sing the praises of Prose and their truly custom made-to-order hair care. Switching to a custom routine from Prose, I've never had to do that because Prose has always worked for me. But if you want to check out Prose for yourself, Derek's going to tell you how right now.
Custom made-to-order hair care from Prose has your name all over it. Take your
pour into him. Frankie was father to 3-year-old Brentley Roden, the product of a previous relationship with a local woman named Chelsea Robinson. In December of 2014, Frankie began dating Hannah Hazel Gilly, and in October of 2015, the couple were engaged to be married and welcoming their son, Ruger Lee Roden, into the world. In high school, Hannah was in 4-H and on the homecoming court, and she was perfect for Frankie because she also loved doing the same country boy things that he liked to do, four-wheeling, mudding, and hanging out with friends and family. She had big plans of attending college, getting a business degree, and opening a daycare. But now she's buried in Hackworth Hill Cemetery in Otway, Ohio. Frankie's baby brother, Chris Jr., was the baby of the family, and he was super close to his mother, Dana. He was a freshman at Piketon High School, and he worked summers at Big Bear Lake Family Resort. Chris Jr. may have had big blue eyes and a baby face, but according to the school superintendent, the 16-year-old was a defender and protector of others. The superintendent, Todd Burkett, said, quote, "He was the first one that if he thought someone wasn't being treated fairly or felt like someone wasn't being treated appropriately, he would speak up," end quote. Chris Jr. was also very close with his sister, Hannah Mae, who was 3 years older than him. They both lived together with their mother, Dana, and they would often post pictures together on social media. Hannah, who I'm going to try to refer to her as Hannah Mae so we don't confuse her with Frankie's fiance, Hannah Gilly. So Hannah Mae was described as being outgoing. She was a spunky teenager. She knew who she was. She knew she was extra. She didn't care. And no one had ever seen her cry. No one had ever seen her scared or depressed. She was just a bundle of energy and light, and she grew up wanting to be a nurse's aide like her mother, Dana. Now, many people in Pike County could not comprehend what happened. If this wasn't the work of some cold-blooded cartel members, who could have done this to the Roden family? No one was perfect, but the Rodens were well-liked and mostly unproblematic people. So let's turn to the crime scenes and see what investigators were facing when they first took up this case. There were 3 crime scenes spread out over the property of the Roden family on Union Hill Road and one more at the trailer of Kenneth Roden on West Fork Road. Surveillance cameras at these locations had either been destroyed or removed, and animals had been found at 2 of these locations. Chris Roden Sr.'s pit bull Chance and boxer Paisley were found alive on his front porch, and a pit terrier mix named Brownie was outside of Kenneth's trailer. Throughout all of the crime scenes, 32 bullets had been fired. And let's start with crime scene number 1, the trailer of Christopher Roden Sr., who lived with his cousin and his best friend, Gary Roden. Upon arriving at the trailer, investigators noted multiple bullet holes on the outside of the trailer and inside the trail of blood that Bobby Joe Manley had.
I apologize. That must be new in this program, because when it was in this scene, of course, it'd roll. But when we put it in the full spectrum, it shouldn't be rolling. Okay, that's weird. Discord has changed. StreamYard has changed a lot. My apologies. Thank you for telling me.
Had spotted was evident immediately. Unlike the other victims, Chris Sr. and Gary appeared to have been awake and dressed when they were attacked, and it looked like they were near the door of the trailer. But then their bodies, after they were shot, had been dragged from the front of the trailer to the back bedroom where they were found. Deputy Coroner Karen Lumen performed autopsies on all 8 of the Roden victims, but she did 7 of them over the weekend of April 23rd and 24th. And then she performed Chris Sr.'s autopsy separately on April 25th. Now, Lumen said she did this because she knew that Chris Sr.'s autopsy was going to take a while since he'd been shot so many times, and it was going to take her a lot of time and work locating all of the bullets. Authorities believe that Chris Sr. and his cousin Gary were the first victims to be attacked, and they had put their time of death at around 11 p.m. on Thursday, April 21st. Chris Sr. had been shot at close range, and he was shot 6 times in the face, once in the chest, once in the stomach, and once in the right forearm. Lumen would later testify that the pattern of wounds indicated Roden was likely on the floor of his trailer unmoving when he was shot in the face. And she said that one shot to Chris Sr.'s face lodged in his spine and caused an internal decapitation. It's believed that the first shot that Chris Sr. suffered from was only 1 to 3 inches away from his face, so at very, very close range. Lumen said, quote, "His forearm was so destroyed and lacerated that the skin was peeled back. You could see muscles. You could see the fractured pieces of bone in there. There was so much trauma there you couldn't see an entrance or exit wound. His arm was barely hanging on to the end of his elbow," end quote. Gary Roden had been shot 4 times in the face. So next we're moving on to crime scene number 2. This is the trailer of Frankie Roden and Hannah Gilly, who had been in bed and asleep with their 6-month-old son when they were murdered. Frankie had been shot twice in the head, and Hannah had been shot 5 times in the head. Moving on to crime scene number 3, this was the trailer of Dana Roden. She and her 2 children, Chris Jr. and Hannah, were all in bed when they were attacked. In separate beds, obviously. Dana Roden was shot 4 times in the head. Her 16-year-old son was also shot 4 times in the head, and Hannah sustained 2 bullet wounds to the head. Crime scene number 4 was the trailer of Kenneth Roden, and as we already talked about, he had been shot just once through his right eye.
I'm more and more leaning towards multiple people being involved based
Yeah.
on the second crime scene, not necessarily the first, but definitely because you have multiple people in different bedrooms who were all executed, presumably before they got out of bed. And I think it's pretty safe to say that if you're sleeping and you hear gunshots in the other room, it's going to wake you up. At least you're going to be sitting up or out of bed heading towards whatever it is to see what's going
This
on.
was a time.
So the fact that they were all still in bed and it appears to be sleeping, it's suggestive that this was a coordinated effort, maybe multiple shooters. I'll be more interested when we get into ballistics to figure out if it's multiple guns or the same gun. That will obviously answer a question.
So I can give you kind of like a little spoiler alert into that, because the ballistics are very extensive actually, and they did a lot of great police work, not only with the ballistics but with boot prints that were found at crime scene number 1, which was Chris Roden Sr.'s trailer. Really interesting stuff that you're going to like. So I really wanted to give us time to talk about that, and we're going to talk about it next time. But they did find more than one type of ammunition. And so, yes, there were at least, I don't want to get too far into it, but at least 2 different weapons used. So at least 2 shooters, even though initially the police were saying, we believe this was only one person. But then they came out later and they were like, okay, we think that there was more than one person here. So, and that's multiple reasons, because the boot prints that they found at Chris Roden Sr.'s trailer in the blood, there was so much blood in this trailer. There's so much blood at all of these crime scenes that the perpetrators had walked through the blood and left boot prints, but they were 2 different sizes. One size boot and it was the exact same boot, exact same tread. And the tread was from a shoe that had just recently been purchased. So they can tell that this was not a boot or a shoe that had been, walked around in for months or years. Newly purchased due to the tread. And one of the treads was 10.5 and one was an 11, but the exact same tread, which may have been done purposely to confuse investigators by wearing the same shoes. But at the end of the day, you're a half size off. So you have a 10.5 and then an 11. So you either have a perpetrator who's wearing 2 different size shoes, or you have more than one shooter.
Well, they could tell that too, if it's a left and right.
Yeah, if it was a left or right, yeah.
I'll save it to get into that because that's fascinating to me. But there's the way we can talk about the ways that they would identify that and how they would be able to tell what you're looking for to tell whether the boot is worn, things like that. There's all these different variables that come into that. But so yeah, at this point, 2 shooters, and I'll even go as far as saying this doesn't sound like a professional to me. This doesn't sound like a professional hit overall, because the manner in which they're shot, not understanding that it doesn't take 4 bullets to the head to kill someone.
It seems personal, right? Yeah.
Especially with someone
Chris
before,
Sr., the way he was shot, internally decapitated, his elbows, holding his arm on by a thread. And it seemed that was the first crime scene.
Well, the forearm tells me that there may have been some type of
defensive wound,
putting their arm up to protect himself.
Yeah.
But
which
overall,
is a natural instinct. Yeah.
If you're a hitman, you know what it takes to kill someone. And especially from that close range, especially based on the type of caliber weapon you're using, 4 shots is overkill.
I believe Chris Sr. was shot a total of 9 times. And they think he was the first victim. And then his cousin Gary, they pulled the bodies into the back bedroom. Once again, the only crime scene where the bodies were moved from the location that they were killed at. So honestly, looking at the crime scenes, if you know nothing about this case, you might think that Chris Roden Sr. was the target. He was the first person killed. That was the first crime scene the killers went to. He was shot the most and what appeared to be the most viciously. So you might think he's the crux of this. He's the nexus. He is why these people are there. And the rest of the family is either an afterthought or just as a way to sort of send a message, as you said. But it seemed, I guess, looking from these crime scenes, would you say it kind of seemed like the father, the patriarch, Chris Roden Sr., the one who had the grow operations on his property, the one who was shot the most, the one who was shot the most brutally, may have been the reason that they were there based on how personal his murder seemed?
Yeah, on the surface, I guess it's how it looks right now. I have a feeling you're going to throw a curveball at us. But yeah, on the surface, you would think if this is somehow related to the weed, then Chris would be the main target. They go there, they take him out, but then obviously they want to take out the family members because they're either involved with this or they know the individuals who carried out this hit. It just seems like a lot from, I keep getting stuck on the marijuana, to be honest with you.
So that's what I was thinking when I first looked through it. I was like, it doesn't have to be a cartel. Maybe it's just another local
drug dealer,
another local grower.
Yes, and, if anything, yes.
Maybe it wasn't even a competition thing. Maybe it was they got in an argument and Chris Roden Sr. was like, oh, I'm going to take out your plants. And then they kind of retaliated. And in that case, yes, it would seem like they take out the family because they're all locals and they all know each other and everyone knows everyone. And the family would probably point the finger at that other person, that other grower, if anything was to go down.
Yep.
And it also, I also felt, because when I first started researching this case years ago, I couldn't figure it out. I was going through all the possibilities in my head. And I also thought maybe they also killed all of those other family members so that you couldn't figure out who the target was, because it's easy if you have one person killed. All right, who are this person's enemies? What interactions has this person had in the past weeks or months? It's going to be a lot easier to single out a motive and to single out maybe an enemy or somebody that they had negative interactions with rather than 8 people, because now you've got to go through all of that with all 8 people to figure out who the target was. So it almost makes the investigation that much harder.
I'm going to reserve judgment at this point. I'm just completely flying blind here. So it just seems like it's a lot of potential red herrings, but we'll see. We'll see if it all ties together.
Okay, so remember that you have a few children here who now are parentless. You have Frankie Roden and Hannah Gillies' 6-month-old son. You also have Hannah Mae Roden's 4-day-old infant daughter, Kylie. So, which blows my mind. To have a baby and 4 days later be murdered while you're in bed with that baby is just so incredibly traumatic to think about. But you've got these children and they don't really have any place to go. They could go to foster care, they could go with other relatives, but they have to figure this out. The police can't just give these babies to family members and say, here you go, you're taking care of this baby now. They've got to do custody proceedings. So in August of 2016, a hearing was held to determine if these custody proceedings for the surviving children should be kept secret from the public. And Pike County Sheriff Charles Reeder, he was present at the hearing, and he requested that the custody disputes should be sealed from the public because he believed that there had been more than one shooter involved in the Roden family massacre. And this is the first time that law enforcement says anything that's confirmed, that can be confirmed, where they're admitting that they believe there's more than one shooter. Up until that point, they had said they believed it was only one person. Now, Reeder was concerned that the children could potentially be in danger from these people. And he said, quote, I believe if the information about the minor children is released, it would put the minor children or their caregivers in grave danger. I do not ever want to find victims 9, 10, and 11 and have them be those 3 minor children. End quote.
Gosh.
I just want to go back and recap the children for not only myself, but anybody who's trying to keep up with this. At Frankie Roden and Hannah Gillies' house, we have 2 children left alive, 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, Brantley and Ruger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you said at Dana's house, there was Dana, there's Hannah Mae, who's 19, and then there's Christopher, who's 16.
Chris Jr., yep.
You said one child was there, Kylie, just born.
Kylie, yes.
And then how old was the other child?
So her other daughter, Sophia, was 3, but Sophia was with her father, who was Hannah's ex-boyfriend, and not the father of this 4-day-old baby.
Okay,
Kylie.
that's what I was going to ask you. So this other child is not the same father as the new baby.
Correct.
Okay. Before we continue, let's take a break. We'll be right back. To order one last
healthy diet
offer you'll find.
You know exactly who.
This case is freaking insane. I'm really going to have to do some diving into this case. Wow. I'm a little bit caught off guard. It is now almost 2:00 my time. I've not eaten. I didn't plan on going live today. We're going to pause here. We'll pick this up another time. Maybe this evening. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But we are going to be following this trial. Definitely going to be following this last trial. And so we'll go from there. I want to say thank you everybody who hopped on. I'm going to go ahead and hop off. I got a ton of homework for college to get done, and I'm going to go see my sister, and we're figuring things out. So I appreciate your time today. I appreciate your hanging with me today. I appreciate your prayers for my sister. Not the worst news, so that's good. So we just want to thank all of y'all for hanging in there with me. Appreciate you. I will see you soon. And oh, by the way, in community is where on YouTube is where I'm going to start posting. So if I'm not on, if I'm supposed to be on and I have to cancel, you'll see there. So keep an eye out in the community page. Things are going to start being posted there. And look forward to seeing you the next time. Thanks for joining me. Y'all have a fabulous day. Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. I hope you have an awesome day. Till next time, take care.